Welcome to your Canadiens Connection on Rocket Sports Radio. We are proud to be the trusted source for all things Habs for more than a decade. This is the Canadiens Connection Podcast.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Canadiens Connection Podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio, where we keep you informed, engaged, and entertained all about the Montreal Canadiens. My name is Amy Johnson. I'm going to be your host for today's show for episode number 336 of Canadiens Connection. And of course, I can't do it without my spectacular co-host who is here with me in the studio each and every week. He is the founder and president of Rocket Sports Media, and his name is Rick Stevens. How are you doing today?
Doing great. The question is, how are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine. Thank you very much.
How did you feel? How were you feeling on Thursday?
I actually felt okay, believe it or not.
No, it was
disappointing that the U.S. lost, but
great game.
It was a great game, and how can you not be disappointed with an actual, really intense, competitive?
And it could have gone either way.
Both teams deserved it.
Yeah.
They both played really well. I know we're going to talk about it later in the show, but I'm at peace with it. It's okay. The U.S. had their big moment the Saturday prior to that, and that was fun. And yeah, I'm good. Well, congratulations to you and to Team Canada.
Yeah, that's kind. Thank you, and congratulations on the NHL and NHLPA for the tournament.
Definitely.
I'm back to wearing my regular podcast hat today. The hat worked last week. I tried something new. It seemed to.
Well, I don't know that it worked for your team the day that you wore
Saturday,
it. The day you wore it.
No, it took a while to take effect.
I see.
No, we're Canadians are feeling pretty good, and you know, at the start of the show, I was going to. And I thought maybe I'll just play a few bars of the anthem, O Canada, but I didn't know which version to play because it seems you can make up your own versions these days.
Don't get me started.
Okay.
Don't get me started on anthems this week.
But the main thing is Habs hockey is back, and we're here to talk about the Montreal Canadiens.
We are.
And yeah.
That's what we're going to do.
We're resetting. We're refocusing.
That's right. Today's episode is entitled Montreal Canadiens Reset, Refreshed, and Refocused.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to talk a little bit about what's happened this week, including the Canadiens getting back to practice, and give you some roster news and updates around that. We're going to give you, of course, your weekly Habs prospect report. We have some NCAA news, some KHL news, as well as AHL and ECHL news for Habs prospects. And then, yeah, we're obviously going to give our thoughts on the Four Nations face-off and how the championship game went down, and some things kind of surrounding the championship game and the tournament that are focused more on the Montreal Canadiens, which might be of interest to some of you. And, you know, now that international best-on-best hockey is kind of back in the forefront of hockey fans' minds. We'll visit an article from The Athletic talking about which hockey hometown could create the best forward line. And you might be surprised at some of those results. In addition to, we don't talk politics on this show ever because this is a hockey show, but when those politics literally are about hockey, then we at least have to make mention of them. We're going to talk about some Quebec politics in terms of international hockey play. Then all of that leads up to our big topic, which comes in segment 2, which is titled 8 Points of Priority in 8 Weeks, What Habs Fans Should Watch For in the Final Stretch of the Canadian Season. And basically, there are 8 weeks left in the regular season, and we have 8 big storylines that Habs fans are going to want to keep an eye on over the course of those 8 weeks. We're going to break all of that down for you, including some audio from David Reinbacher in his return to play this week, so you're not going to want to miss any of that. We have a great Canadiens Connection question of the week for you, which we're going to bring to you so that you can submit your answers and thoughts in terms of that. And then in the third segment, As we do every week, we let you have your say, and we will be reading the best responses from last week's Canadiens Connection question of the week. So lots coming for you today. It's going to be a fun show.
Great show.
So what happened since we've been gone? Well, the Montreal Canadiens, didn't play any games, but the Canadiens did, with an A, not an E. The Canada-US, well, of course, there were the first games, the doubleheader on Monday, which was President's Day in the United States, Family Day.
In a couple of provinces.
And of course, Canada played that day. The U.S. played that day. There were some interesting matchups there. But of course, the big billing was the championship game that came on Thursday with taking it all the way to overtime. And as Biz Nasty said, Connor McJesus with the game winner in overtime.
The love of his life, he called Connor.
Yeah. The thrilling game. We're going to talk about it a little bit later in the show for sure.
Poor Austin Matthews.
Yeah, I'm sure Habs fans
I'm
feel
sure
real,
there's a lot of
feel
people
real sad
sorry,
for him. So where are the Canadians now that it's back to regular NHL play? The Canadians, as they get ready to start getting back to game action themselves. Let's just give you a reminder of where they're sitting at 56 games played. They are 25, 26, and 5 on the season. That gives them 55 points, putting them at 7th in the Atlantic Division, 23rd overall in the NHL. And Rick, I think it's safe to say that their chances of making the playoffs are rapidly slipping away.
2.7% chance of making the playoffs. They're on pace for an 82-point season. That's not going to get them there. This would be the first Montreal Canadiens team in history to miss the playoffs for 4 consecutive years. It's never happened before. So we have to start looking the other way. And first, as we always do, talk about the strength of schedule. They got an relatively easy schedule the rest of the way. 29th in difficulty of schedule. That's not very difficult. But we have to start looking in the other direction. And right now they have the 9th best chance of winning the draft lottery. And one of the things that we get questions all the time, 5853 Rocket or email or on our social media. Why do you keep saying the Canadiens have no chance of making the playoffs, or in this case, 2.7% chance of making the playoffs? They're only 5 points out. They're only 6 points out. So as of today, 55 points. They would have to be ahead of Columbus and Boston. So that would be 61 points, just 6 points back, 6 points easily made up in 26 games. No, that's I think people think that the Canadiens can get 3 wins, get to 6 points, and all other teams are static. They don't play, or they lose all the games, or and that's just not realistic. And in fact, given that there are so many teams in the mix, or 7 or 8 teams in the same vicinity, Montreal Canadiens would have to be 6 points better than 7 or 8 teams. They must be 6 points better over the next month or so than 7 or 8 teams that they're competing with. And that's just not. They had a great run in December and early January. It's unlikely to be repeated, and that's why the odds are calculated so low for the playoffs. So I think for the sake of realism, being realistic, we can start to think about things that the Canadiens will focus on if they're not a playoff team this year.
Absolutely.
Does that
make sense? I think that sums it up.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, the Canadiens did get back to practice this week. They reported to Broussard on Tuesday, getting back to practice. And one of the first things that happened this week was David Reinbacher was loaned to the Laval Rocket, cleared to play, immediately sent down to the AHL to start to get some reps. And we're going to talk about that move a little bit later here. Emil Heineman earlier in the week practiced with the team with a blue non-contact jersey. However, on Friday for practice, he was wearing a regular jersey, taking regular line rushes. So looks like Emil Heineman back in the lineup on Saturday night
against the Senators. And the nice thing is that returns the lines to the format that had been consistent that Marty St. Louis liked to use prior to Heineman's injury. Since then, he's been all over the map looking for the right combinations. They're going back to the lines that were successful prior to Heineman's injury.
Interestingly enough, when the Habs came back for practice on Tuesday, Josh Anderson needed therapy day.
It's a bit odd. He had been off for 10 days or thereabouts, and the rest, whatever the injury is that he is suffering from, rest apparently didn't help. He needed therapy when he returned. So you got to ask going forward, should he be in the lineup? If there's no reason for him to, and maybe it's potential of trading him or whatever it is, but at some point he's probably, if this is a nagging injury or if he needs surgery or whatever it is, there's becoming a higher likelihood that he's going to get shut down.
Someone who is currently nursing an injury is Michael Pezzetta, suffering from a lower body injury. He is kind of undergoing daily evaluation for that injury.
Another surprise, something that didn't know, wasn't made public before the break, but apparently he is suffering with lower body injury.
And Sam Montembeault will finally get to dress for a game after he did spend a couple of weeks with Team Canada, the Four Nations face-off, but he did not dress for any of their games. So he will get back to game action on Saturday night, getting the start against the Senators. All right, that's about it for the roster news to this point. So let's just kind of shift gears just a little bit and check in on the Habs prospects.
It's time for the Rocket Report. The Rocket Sports Media Team is your premier source for information about the Laval Rocket, the AHL affiliate of the Montreal Canadiens, as well as Habs prospects playing in the CHL, NCAA, and leagues around the world.
We're going to kick things off with some NCAA news because it seems that Jacob Fowler just insists upon being a topic of conversation every week. Darn it.
He, a milestone of sorts. He had his 20th win of the season. In fact, went on to his 21st win of the season. Again, having a spectacular season. The Beanpot, just a blip, the loss there. His record now, 21-5-1, 175 goals against, 935 save percentage, and 6 shutouts.
Love it. He's already received plenty of accolades this season, not the least of which are the fact that he is a 2024-25 Hobey Baker Award nominee and a Mike Richter Award semifinalist. But you can add to the awards that he's a contender for now because he's been named a semifinalist for the 95th AAU Sullivan Award, Rick, which is given to the top amateur athlete in the U.S. This is not just hockey.
Yeah.
This is top amateur athlete in the across all sports in the U.S.
And whether he wins this or not, the fact that he's nominated is a real big achievement for Jacob Fowler in recognition of how well his season has gone so far.
Absolutely. So we wish him the best. We'd love a sweep here. We'd love it. Switching over to the KHL, Ivan Demidov, just keeps racking up the goals, the assists, the points. He's just kind of just cruising along over there, isn't he?
47 points in 56 games. In his last 9, he has 11 points. 9 games, 11 points, so he's just cruising along.
The Laval Rocket, if we can switch to the AHL now, they did continue play during the Four Nations face-off. The AHL did not take a break. So Laval, during the course of the last week, they played 4 games. They beat Rochester 5-2. Then they dropped a big game, 7-2 against Toronto. Shortly followed there, by coming home to play the Manitoba Moose, losing Wednesday night's game to the Moose 5-4. That was David Reinbacher's season debut. He did play that day. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a few moments. But Laval got their retribution on Friday night with a big 5-1 victory over Manitoba. So definitely flipped the script and got back in the win column on Friday night. So they have had a series of losses over the last 2 to 3 weeks, which has caused them to slip just a little bit in the standings, but nothing to be concerned about yet. They're now down to second in the North Division and second overall in the AHL, but still cruising along just fine. The Trois-Rivières Lions, they just keep winning. They just keep winning. In fact, they won all 3 games that they played this past week, beating Adirondack 4-3, then beating Adirondack 6-2, then beating Adirondack 4-1. So Adirondack had a really bad week.
If you look at the schedule, and I had to check this twice because I find it hard to believe that they have played Adirondack 7 games in a row.
Well,
it's like a playoff
that's a series. Yeah,
I know.
And it's been back and forth between, like, some have been in Trois-Rivières, some have been in Adirondack.
Right. Yeah.
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
But the way that they're going, they're up to second overall in the ECHL. Trois-Rivières just having an outstanding season. So kudos to them. Hope they can keep that going. But of course, the big hockey billing this week was the championship game. Canada coming out as victors, 3-2 against the U.S. in overtime to win the Four Nations Face-Off championship game. As we said, Connor McDavid was the one who scored the game winner in overtime. This was an incredibly intense game. The hype leading up to it was palpable. The building, TD Garden, was rocking, and it was just. I mean, I even said it about a week ago watching the first U.S.-Canada game and the intensity and the skill level that was on display and the speed and all those types of things. But I know you messaged me and said something very similar this week too. Like, how do you go back to watching just plain old NHL hockey after this? Because the hockey that we were treated to watch over the course of the tournament was just absolutely enthralling. And the championship game did not disappoint. Anybody could have won that game.
Well, yeah, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because the NHL was talking about, and we'll talk about the numbers in a minute, but about one of the reasons for this tournament was using it as a vehicle to attract new fans, and certainly it was being talked about on not only both sides of the border but across the world as, wow, is this what hockey is? And people who had never watched hockey were watching. And now if they say, okay, I want to see more of that and tune in, it's not going to be the same until maybe, you get to the playoffs. But that's one of the difficulties for fans, for even players to continue now the grind of games in February, March, and early April before it gets to the playoffs is tough. Is really tough. And the other part, and listen, Connor McDavid, his coming out with the game-winning goal. Nathan McKinnon, the MVP, absolutely worthy, and it's great for these best players of the game to get a showcase for their talent, to get to play with both with and against the best in the world. It's fantastic. But the other side of the coin is the injuries. And that's always what the owners and GMs have been worried about. And you think about Shea Theodore lost probably to the playoffs, Charlie McAvoy, that infection, Matt Tkachuk, did Crosby,
Crosby. I don't know.
His
if
elbow
did
he aggravate that? There's lots of people who are suffering from injuries. Many that were either happened in the tournament or afterwards. And you might be a Montreal Canadiens fan. So, what do I care about Shea Theodore? Well, the thing is that as the Canadiens add talent to their lineup, Montreal Canadiens players, at least we hope so, are going to be on these teams. And if you're in the midst of a playoff run, or a really good run towards the playoffs, do you want to lose one of your potentially one of your best players in a tournament like this? That's why I have trouble with this with them. Yeah, I don't like the timing. I don't like. Yeah, I don't, and I'm not saying I don't like the All-Star game either.
God, I will take this over an All-Star game every year.
Yeah, for sure. But I'd almost rather have just a bye week for everybody. And everybody compares. This tournament was great, but doesn't hold a candle to 72 Summit Series. And if anyone tries to convince you that they don't know what they're talking about. But that tournament was held in September prior to the season, and maybe that's a better idea if this is going to be ongoing. And remember that the Olympics, it's going to be a lot longer than the 10 days or so that the NHL was shut down. I think it's 17 days.
Yeah, it's usually like 3 weeks.
So, anyway, just my
all
general
sorts
thoughts.
Of perspectives. Yeah. But it was television ratings were massive, broke records for ESPN in the US and for Sportsnet in Canada. Both networks had more viewers than they've ever had for any NHL game. I mean, it's just that it's astronomical, the viewership, the buzz. It was just everyone. It's been a long time since there's been must-see TV, and that was must-see TV.
Well, you had NFLers. You had NFLers and NFL broadcasters tweeting about, wait a minute, we have the Pro Bowl, there's the NBA All-Star skills little thing that they have, and the NHL has this?
Has 3 fights in 9 seconds.
Yeah,
and just an abs. Yeah.
It was
George Kittle was in the building on Monday. He's
supporting Team Sweden,
wearing Team Sweden gear. He's apparently friends with Philip Forsberg, and Forsberg bought him a bunch of gear and said, "You're going to wear this, and you're going to sit with our wives, and you're going to cheer for Team Sweden." I mean, it was everybody came together for the love of the game, for country pride, all of those types of things. And, I think it was one of those really kind of cool moments as a sports fan where you knew everybody else who is passionate about the sport that you are was doing the same thing at the exact same time you were. They were watching one game and feeling the highs and lows of it and biting their nails unless you were the Montreal Canadiens because you were at a charity event that night. But,
okay then.
Yeah, I don't know who, as you said to me this morning when you sent me the agenda, I'm not sure who decided that the team's casino night should take place on the same night as the championship game of the Four Nations face-off, but that's what happened. So nobody involved with the Canadiens organization actually got to watch the game in real time, which I think is unfortunate.
Yeah, it's even more. It's dumb. It's really dumb. What if a Montreal Canadien?
What if Finland, as you said today, what if Finland was in the final?
And okay, Sam Montembeault wasn't going to play under near any condition, but what if a Montreal Canadiens player was playing and you're out at some casino charity event? And then the lame thing that we'll post a picture of Josh Anderson standing next to the big screen TV saying Josh is locked in.
Standing in the casino watching the game on a TV because that's probably what he'd rather be. No offense to the charity event, and that goes to that money goes for very good purposes, but come on.
And it's not like the schedule was a surprise. The schedule was the schedule for a very long time. The Canadiens knew that they would be scheduling this charity event on the final.
All of these guys bizarre. Who play at the top level of their game, and at least the players from this NHL team missed the experience of watching this game in real time like all the rest of us did. And I think that's really unfortunate.
So that was bizarre, equally bizarre. And I don't even know how to take this. That the Canadiens back to practice on Tuesday. Marty St. Louis back to his media availability. The first question was from our friend. We know Patrick Frillet from RDS. And the first question is, hey, how about that Four Nations Cup? Marty, what'd you think?
Yeah.
And his reply was, honestly, I didn't watch it. I haven't watched that much. I'm here to talk about the Montreal Canadiens. Turned away, like shunned Patrick, looked over towards the other media in the room as if, man, that was a stupid question, and moved on. But wait a minute, what did you say? You haven't watched the most watched game ever?
Yeah, the thing that everybody's talking about in the hockey community around the world.
That I found that baffling. And in fact, there's an article on TVS Sport that says this everybody was watching, but the coach of the Montreal Canadiens is not interested. And yes, you're interested in, as they say, you want Marty's opinion on what happened. He's, as the article says, we want to know that we want to know Marty St. Louis' opinion more than we want to know our prime minister's opinion. In the article, it says many wait to know what they think before thinking themselves. He has a significant impact on all hockey fans, both old and young. But beyond that, the players that you hear, the players that are talking and they learned something from this. You would think that, the Montreal Canadiens lost 8 of 9 going into the break. Marty, I would hope over the break, Marty's been breaking down film and got his pen and pencil out and watching, if not for some inspiration, for some strategies, for some concepts, for
how do the best in our game do it?
Yeah. The risk management thing was, which Marty buys into, was talked about a lot during this series by the coaching staff. I don't get it, and neither does TVA. It was almost that, as they say, it was almost that it was beneath him. It says. It seems rather odd that a guy like him didn't really watch the best hockey games of the decade, and beyond that. Really, really odd.
It's yeah. I would bet he watched some of it, but he won't admit it because that would be, why would I want to tell people that I watched this other hockey tournament that I wasn't involved? I don't. It's just weird.
But as we said earlier, the way it all panned out, U.S. winning during the round robin, if that's what they're calling it, Canada winning the final.
Narrowly.
No, absolutely. It was tough. I was asked and I got a message from or an email from our dear friend Dino. He said, "Who are you picking?" I don't know. Canada had the better forwards. The U.S. was better on defense. Huge advantage for U.S. In goal. Coaching, I thought, was about equal. Leadership advantage for Canada. Home ice advantage for the U.S. There was, it almost all balanced out. And as it turned out, it just was indeed that close. Goaltending, I mentioned goaltending. I know that many of the journalists are saying, well, we should all apologize to Jordan Binnington. Not really. First of all, Jordan Binnington didn't play that well through the
round robin.
No. 2 bad goals against Sweden, a bad goal against the U.S. in the first game. And even when we were messaging in the final, I was saying, I don't like the way Binnington was playing during the first 3 periods. He was overplaying the puck. He was spinning. He was out of position. And then he becomes, I don't know what he became.
Like a superhero in overtime.
A superhero in overtime. And he was fantastic. And okay, if that's why John Cooper and others, Doug Armstrong, picked him, then they made the right choice.
Just wish he could do that consistently.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe if he plays better, during the other games, Canada's not in the situation it's in. Full credit to Binnington. He was great in that overtime. He was great in the overtime game against Sweden. But Canada is in tough because, if you talk top 5 goalies in the league, there's not a Canadian goalie among them. And that's something Canada used to dominate, an area it used to dominate.
That's right. Well, congratulations to Team Canada. Team USA will learn that you cannot leave Connor McDavid open by himself in the slot. It's just a big no-no. Cover your man.
And good for Mitch Marner.
Good for Mitch.
We don't want to congratulate Leafs too much, but if you're going to criticize Auston Matthews, then you gotta praise Mitch Marner
and Brad Marchand.
No, actually, Brad Marchand was kind of a little bit invisible through the tournament, more or less. I mean, he said the right thing and maybe provided leadership and all that.
I think more mentors. Yeah. I think he served that role. I think he served an off ice role bigger than an on ice role.
Yeah.
Great hockey all around. Makes me definitely look forward to the Olympics next year. We know this rivalry will certainly have new fuel for next year's fire. So of course, with all of this, the big thing was you saw Colby Armstrong tweeting it this week. Nova Scotia 3, Sweden 1. That type of thing. Particularly with the crowd out of the Halifax area. That was playing for Team Canada. And so a lot of speculation started to come up, and there's an article in The Athletic about it, trying to determine which hockey hometown could create the best forward line, which I think that's a fun exercise.
It is fun. I don't usually like these kind of what if kind of fantasy articles, but this one I found fascinating. And from a Montreal's perspective, and we'll get to that in a minute. But which hockey hometown has the best forward line? In the opinion of the Athletic writer, it is Halifax. And from Halifax, you're going to get a line of Nathan MacKinnon, Sidney Crosby, and Brad Marchand. Now, Sidney Crosby, even what he did, against Finland when Finland was coming back and he delivered a hit, and then the empty netter, that's Sidney Crosby is Sidney Crosby. Nathan MacKinnon being the MVP of the tournament, and the aforementioned Marchand. That's a pretty formidable line. Mm-hmm. Number 2, Mitch Marner, who set up the game-winning goal. Mitch Marner from Toronto. Toronto is 2 on Hockey Hometown. Connor McDavid. All right, Connor McDavid. We know what he did. And Robert Thomas as a first line. And number 3 would be Moscow. Alex Ovechkin, Ivan Barbashev, and Nikita Kucherov.
Can't argue with those.
No, you can't. And you go through this list, and I keep looking for Montreal here because Montreal is the cradle of organized hockey. I think I've heard that phrase thousands of times. Number 4, we have Stockholm. Zibanejad, Jesper Bratt, Phoenix at number 5. Really?
Well, it's the Kachucks. It's Austin
Matthews, Tage Thompson, Matthew Knees.
Yeah.
St. Louis, number 6, which has the Kachucks and Clayton Keller.
Okay, all right.
Tampere, Finland.
Yeah.
Which has Barkov, Patrick Laine, Roope Hintz. Boston, Kreider, Eichel, and Matthew Boldy. Vancouver, here's a Canadian team. Maybe we're getting close to Montreal. You have Reinhart, Barzal, Nugent Hopkins. Detroit, Kyle Connor, Dylan Larkin. Dylan Larkin was good.
Dylan Larkin was very good. Yeah.
Alex DeBrincat. Dylan Larkin, I liked his comment after the series saying, listen, if you want to be considered for the Olympics or this kind of a tournament, go play in the World Championships. And he was talking to fellow Americans, but Nick Suzuki could do well listening to Dylan Larkin's advice. That's just an aside. Number 11, the second Finland team on the list. You have Turku, Lehkonen, Rantanen, and Capo Caco. Pittsburgh, number 12, Logan Cooley, Vincent Trocheck, JT Miller, who got in that fight, punched himself, Pareko, and that was another Russian team city, Chelyabinsk.
Oh, Chelyabinsk, yeah.
Russia with Panarin, Dadonov, and Nikushkin. Calgary, Taylor Hall, Braden Point, Dylan Holloway, and number 15, this was their top 15, Minneapolis, Jake Gensel. He was dangerous every time he was on the ice. Anders Lee and Brock Besser. All right, so where's Montreal? Maybe in the honorable mentions. Not the first honorable mention. That goes to tiny London, Ontario. I lived in London, Ontario. Enjoyed it very much. And Nick Suzuki's from there. Bo Horvat, Nazem Kadri. Then you get to Winnipeg. Lived there too. Karlstad, Sweden. And finally, the very final honorable mention. So we're almost at 20 cities now. And you finally get to Montreal with Jonathan Huberdeau, Anthony Duclair, and Alexei Lafreniere. None of those forwards on the Four Nations. None from Quebec at all. Never mind Montreal. That is now. I didn't bring this up to make fun of Montreal. It's simply Montreal and Quebec hockey has to be better. Has to be better. There has to be something done to find out why Montreal isn't higher on this list, and being one of those spots that is producing the best players in the world. It has to be better.
And there's not a lot of people who would argue against the fact that Quebec-born players who are making it big in the NHL is on the decline, and that it's harder drafting out of the queue. The last few years, we talk about that every year at the draft, that fewer and fewer players from the queue are being drafted. So it's a little puzzling that in the face of all of this national pride between these four countries, everybody, coming together, wanting to support their nation, and talk about the successes of their homeborn national players and so forth. The Quebec National Assembly this week, Premier Francois Legault and his CAQ government blocked a PQ motion that would have created a national hockey team for Quebec and advocate for its recognition by the IIHF. I think the Illinois state legislature would also like to have their own national. I mean, really?
This is just bonkers. The government, the Francois Legault, had introduced a bill to make hockey the national sport of Quebec. And that's
fine.
Sounds
that's great.
Reasonable to me.
Yeah.
The PQs decided that here's one-upmanship. We're upset that there's a lack of francophones on this fantastic tournament we've been watching this past week. Sam Montembeault was the only representative, and we talked about his place of birth being one of the reasons that he was there to avoid any kind of controversy. And yes, they want to. All right, if you're not picking our guys, we're going to create our own team and bring our own team. And so then
you want to have your own national hockey team for a province.
Yeah.
Not a provincial hockey team,
right? A
national hockey team.
So then I guess naturally the Montreal Press Corps decided, hey, Alex Carrier, what do you think about this? Which, yes, there's your Canadiens connection. And Alex Carrier oddly spoke quite favorably about the proposal. He said, quote, obviously it would be an honor to represent Quebec, but wouldn't it be a complex process? Wouldn't other provinces want to do the same thing? Well, of course. Good point, Alex. If Quebec gets its own team, wouldn't Ontario? Wouldn't it seems a little bizarre. But then he went on to say, and provided a bit of fuel to the fire for the other side, saying maybe it'd be different if we had to play a best of 7 against the United States, but in just one game, we could be competitive. And he's
as long as we only have to play one game.
And he said, maybe that he and Jonathan Drouin had talked about it or texted about it and come up with a potential roster and all that sort of thing.
Goodness.
But this gets back to there's a huge problem. There's a huge problem. This season, there were 24 forwards and 11 defensemen from Quebec who have played at least 10 games in the NHL. And it's between 30 to 35 players from Quebec in the NHL every year for the last few. That's one per team. And we know that many in the Montreal media would like to throw out the rules of merit and say, no, you've got to staff the Montreal Canadiens with as many homegrown players. Well, there's only one on average. So the Canadiens are always above that, well above that average. And then you mentioned the draft. Well, in 2023, the NHL teams drafted only 12 players from the queue. And last year, not much better, 15. And no player from the queue has been selected in the first round of the NHL draft in the last 2 years. So this is saying there's a problem. And we've been saying this for a long time. The way you fix it is to find the source of the problem. It seems that the folks in the Quebec National Assembly are putting the cart before the horse. They want the symbolism of a team rather than addressing the root of the problem. And that's what I think hockey fans anyway, is what we'd much rather see to get the talent up. Something's wrong in the queue, and it's not. I see they got rid of smelling salts. That isn't the reason. That's not what's causing the problems. They've got to address the real problems, and I think we all want to see that.
Absolutely. And I, there's no argument for me. Would love to see more Francophone representation on Team Canada's national men's hockey team. You just have to raise the quality and raise the talent and the skill level that you're developing out of Quebec. And then you'll see that happen. And then you'll have people from your province out there that you're rooting for as well. It's just, the whole thing was bizarre to me. Very, very bizarre. All right, we're going to leave you pondering that for just a moment. We're going to take our first break here on the show and hear from our sponsors over at DraftKings. When we come back, it's time for us to tackle this week's big topic segment, 8 points of priority in 8 weeks, what Habs fans should watch for in the final stretch of the Canadiens season. You are not going to want to miss it. There are some key storylines that you want to watch in the last 2 months of the regular season. So stick around, don't go anywhere, and we'll be back in just a moment. You are listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio.
This NHL season has been as predictable as a puck rolling on its edge. No one knows where it's going. But that just means there's time for your favorite team to figure things out, and games left for you to get in the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your team, and place your first bet. And if you're new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. 888-467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. New customers only. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. NHL and the NHL Shield are registered trademarks of the National Hockey League. NHL and NHL team marks are the property of the NHL and its teams. Copyright NHL 2025, all rights reserved.
And welcome back to the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio. Once again, my name is Amy Johnson. If you'd like to follow me on social media, you can find me on X at Flyers Rule. And of course, my co-host who's here in the studio with me today, Rick Stevens. You'll want to follow him on X as well, at Rocket Sports. That's an important one, at Rocket Sports, because that's where you'll also get links to any of our written content as well as updates about the Montreal Canadiens, links when our YouTube videos drop, that type of thing. Speaking of YouTube, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find that at InsideTheCanadiens.com. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. Just tap that subscribe button, whatever podcast platform you're currently listening to the show on. So over this nice little break in February, the Canadiens have had some time to rest, heal, recharge, get some practice time in, all those kinds of things. They should be raring to go before the start of the rest of the season. And so, as we've talked about, the play that they had for the kind of the 4 weeks leading up to the Four Nations face-off, that slide kind of took them out of the playoff conversation, which was exciting for 5 or 6 weeks there in December and early January. But there are still meaningful things for the Canadiens and their fans to focus on over the next 26 games. And so we have 8 top stories for Habs fans to pay attention to, follow, and focus on over the course of the next 8 weeks. The first and foremost, obviously, is the one that's coming very, very rapidly. It'll be here before we know it, and that is the NHL trade deadline, which, just as a reminder, is on Friday, March 7th. So just a couple of weeks away.
6 games. After the break is over, of course, the Canadiens, as we record on Saturday, are in Ottawa on Saturday night. Next Tuesday, at home at the Bell Center, it's the Hurricanes, the first chance to see Mikko Rantanen with Carolina Hurricanes. The worst team comes in on Thursday, San Jose Sharks. Then a home-and-home series with the Buffalo Sabres. And that takes ahead to the Oilers of Edmonton, the Canadiens, the start of their Western road trip on Thursday, March 6th. And the 7th is a Friday, the NHL trade deadline. So just 6 games. So the trade deadline is going to be the focus. And I think Kent Hughes had said the players will decide how I approach the trade deadline. I think not that the team wanted to send this message, but they have sent a message, losing 8 of the past 9. And it's clear that Kent Hughes should be a seller at the trade deadline. That includes players like Jake Evans, and we heard that it was Pierre LeBrun that reported that the two sides are pretty far apart on contract talks. We heard this week from Yoel Armia, although he didn't want to talk about it very much, but that there are contract negotiations going on between himself and the Montreal Canadiens. His quote is, "Yes, my agent is talking to the team, but I prefer not to think about it. I just want to focus on trying to help the team win games." Other players who, could be part of a trade deadline transaction, David Savard, of course, Christian Dvorak, Mike Matheson, any of those folks would not only it's not only the asset coming back, it's freeing up a place in the lineup because, we've heard both Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes say that they want to have their young players play meaningful games in the National Hockey League. And there are still 26 games left. So for the next 8 weeks, they could be taking some of that time. I mean, you're not going to necessarily put a veteran like David Savard in the press box. But if you traded him, no matter what you get back, you open up a spot to audition some of the good young talent from Laval.
Well, that is actually the second storyline to watch over the next 8 weeks, and that is call-ups from the Laval Rocket. Will we see Logan Mailloux again? Will we see Owen Beck come back up again? Will we see Jared Davidson at some point? Will David Reinbacher come up for a couple of NHL games at some point after he's gotten his conditioning back? There's lots of options. Will Joshua Waugh get a look? Those kinds of things. Certainly lots to keep an eye on.
I thought it was very interesting. Pascal Vincent, we heard him this week say that in the midweek game, say that Josh Waugh wasn't very good. He was not moving his feet. He was not engaged. And listen, it's been clear that Joshua Waugh at times, he had problems with his skating. He seems to have worked on that. He had problems with his conditioning. He made an effort to work on that, but still, his compete level, his work ethic wanes from time to time, and that's what Pascal Vincent very pointedly called him out on this past week. And certainly in the Friday night game, Joshua Waugh was much better. So has he, or will he do enough to either contribute to Laval in their stretch run? Will he do enough in the playoffs, or will he somewhere along the line earn a call up? And as you said, I think Logan Mailloux has earned a call up. Jared Davidson, Owen Beck. And they deserve some time to see where they're at in going into next season.
Absolutely. One of those, as I mentioned, could be David Reinbacher. He is storyline number 3, keeping an eye on his return to play after a lengthy injury time off and his progress. So he's played 2 games this week. He played Wednesday night and Friday night. Wednesday night was not a great outing for the Laval Rocket. Friday they did much better with a much more decisive victory against the Manitoba Moose. And this was what Pascal Vincent had to say about Reinbacher's return.
I thought he was our best defenseman in the first half of the game. He was really good. Like his reads, killing plays, first pass, his ability to anticipate what was happening in front of him. So I'm very impressed with him.
So Pascal Vincent, very impressed. That was a game where Pascal Vincent was not impressed with the rest of his team. He said, this was not my favorite game. That was the 5-4 loss to the Manitoba Moose in Reinbacher's debut. Interesting because David Reinbacher, he ended the game -2. Maybe that's not that meaningful. He was on the ice for 4 of the 5 Manitoba Moose goals. That is significant. And as the folks at La Presse pointed out, it could have been much worse because his accuracy isn't that honed yet, and some of his off-target shots led to chances, including a breakaway, which Connor Hughes saved. He looked good in the offensive zone. He was, a good first pass. He was moving the puck well. But as La Presse said, his coverage in the defensive zone was lacking. And even, in the game on Friday, it seems that David Reinbacher is slow to make his decision. He sometimes gets befuddled about what he wants to do with the puck. And I think it's more of a head thing than a body thing. There was one instance early in the game on Friday night where he got to the puck and he just kind of froze, and the Moose player came in and took it away from him. That he eventually got it back. He turned it over again, and he turned it over a third time when he had options.
All in his own zone at the same time.
Yeah, for an outlet pass. There was people open. He could have carried it. There was nobody pressuring him, and he just flipped it out to center. He is struggling on the defensive side and in his decision making, and I mean, he hasn't played for a long time, so that will come. Interesting that we played what Pascal Vincent said after the game, but prior to the game, when Pascal Vincent and it was announced that David Reinbacher would be making his debut. Pascal Vincent said, "You're going to have to be don't expect him to be perfect. You're going to have to be patient." And his quote was, "He's slow in his reads. It's normal. The guys, and that's the guys around him, have been taught for months." And the inference there is that Reinbacher hasn't. So it seems that he was cautioning journalists not to expect much because he was slow in his decision making. He was slow in his reads. His gaps weren't very good. And then somebody maybe had a word with him. I mean, Reinbacher's a very important prospect for the team. Pascal Vincent was much more effusive in his praise after the game. And listen, he played a lot. He had 19 shifts in that debut and a little bit on the penalty kill. And so I think it's going to take time. But you got to, what's reality and I think they're just trying to praise Reinbacher and make sure that he comes back with confidence.
Absolutely. So how did David Reinbacher feel about getting back on the ice?
I mean, I think it felt pretty good. Good pace out there. For sure, a loss is not what we want, but I think it was quite a right first impression. For sure, that many goals we gave up is too much, but take the best out and come back on Friday.
Okay, so he acknowledges that the defensive play, he kind of spread it around to the team, but not exactly what they want, but focus on what they did well. And those are the kinds of things that Pascal Vincent mentioned, and come back Friday. So I think that's reasonable. These quotes from both Pascal Vincent and David Reinbacher collected for us by our own Chris G, who on site in Laval for these games.
That's right. We have one more that Chris G has brought for us, which is also from David Reinbacher, talking about his conditioning.
I feel pretty good. I got a lot of trust from the coaches. That was really nice. So, I tried to give it back, and I feel pretty good. It was a good pace. I mean, the other team had a good gap the whole game, so they made it hard on us. But we got to find ways to beat them.
Two key points there, that the coaches showed trust in him. They gave him 19 shifts despite the fact that he was on the ice for so many goals. That's important to a player coming back, showing trust in him, and he said he tried to return it. He talked about the pressure that the Moose forwards were existing on the defense, that it was tough. The gap was tough, and that's something that has to be better going forward. Something we should mention here is that David Reinbacher a little ahead of schedule, maybe a week or two. So he went on to praise the medical staff about how they helped him deal with being out. He said the coaches, the physiotherapists, the equipment guys gave me energy. I'm very grateful to all of them. And then he also talked about being around the Montreal Canadiens and that he got to go on a road trip, the California road trip. And he said that Lane Hutson was his roommate and that he had a lot of fun. So I think the team at every level really handled what could have been a disappointing injury for a young player like that. Handled it very, very well.
I think so too. So that's 3 storylines of our 8 to keep track of over the next 8 weeks. Storyline number 4 is player milestones. And we're talking particularly about Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield. Are they going to hit some significant milestones in this season?
Yeah. Cole Caulfield is on pace for 38 goals. He's going to make the 40-goal plateau. That's something to watch. And Canadiens fans are also, it's important for their best player, their captain, to watch Nick Suzuki if he's going to make the point a game threshold, 82 points, 82 games. He's a little behind that pace now, 76, 77. I think he's on pace for it. You'd have to pick it up a little bit, but both are worth watching. I think the other thing, just to add one, just off the top of my head, Caulfield is first in goals, Suzuki's second. Who's going to be third? So far, it's Brendan Gallagher, but that's mostly based on a really good start to his season. He's tailed off a bit. Who's going to be third in goal scoring? Could be, it's wide open right now and something interesting to watch.
Definitely. Storyline number 5 is the Calder Trophy race because, like it or not, Lane Hutson is still in that conversation.
Maybe Macklin Celebrini ahead at this point. Michkov. But it's interesting that a defenseman is in this, and Lane Hutson has a real opportunity to watch. I found it interesting that one of the questions asked was this week with the players coming back, were the Montreal Canadiens out of gas? And Nick Suzuki said, yeah, mentally and physically we were a little bit out of gas. Lane Hutson, no, I wasn't. I was fine. I didn't need the break.
Well, yeah, he was all pumped up at Boston University.
Well, he went and practiced with his alma mater, and he was on the ice a few times, and he said he wasn't showing any signs of fatigue at all.
You're like, let's go.
Yeah.
Let's make it 92 games this season. Come on. Another storyline to watch, which I think is going to be interesting, particularly after more comments were made during the course of the Four Nation face-off, and that's going to be Patrick Laine's ice time. We saw Patrick Laine kind of slow down a little bit production-wise in the weeks leading up to the break. We know that he talked about that fact during the course of playing for Team Finland, that he was looking forward to getting some more ice time than he had been playing and that type of thing. So what's going to happen now?
Yeah, it's this seems like a bit of a power struggle as such, because yes, Patrick Laine, when he came back from injury, was on fire. He scored all those goals on the power play. And then teams adjusted and shut him down, and he hasn't scored a goal in a while. And Marty St. Louis didn't like that he wasn't contributing in other ways, dropped him down to the lineup. Of course, that spot on the fourth line was open, and Patrick Laine found it. And so when he got to the national, the Team Finland team, it was kind of a not so veiled shot across the bow. Finally, I'll be getting more ice time. And there's one of the games that he was named second star, and he did pretty well with a little bit better, more ice time and with better teammates. And it must have been something that Patrick Laine talked about a lot, because Team Finland players were saying, I think it was Barkov that said, "Hey, look what he can do when he's given more ice time." Almost, "Hey, Marty." Message. And on Tuesday, that was one of the questions that the media asked Marty St. Louis. Hey, look at what Patrick Laine, he was talking about ice time. He got more ice time. Look what he can do. And Marty said, if he's not doing much in 10 minutes a game, why would I give him more time? Paraphrasing, of course. So it seems to be a bit of a tug of war between these two. Fortunately, for both of them, I think, is that with Heineman returning, it allows, as we said before, those lines to go back and Patrick Laine to find his way back to the second line. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be something that is going to, over the next 26 games, something to watch about, and there's going to be stories written about it for sure. Definitely.
Another, big splashy name with the Canadiens that's going to have some question marks around it is Juraj Slafkovsky. Is he going to narrow down what his role and identity on the team is going to be?
It's interesting because I don't know if anybody else watched the Four Nations Cup, but Juraj Slafkovsky did. And he said, I want to be like Brady Tkachuk. I'm going to be the Montreal Canadiens, Brady Tkachuk. Okay. That will be my new identity. And I remember when this is before they were drafted, and we were watching the juniors and the junior tournament and the pre-tournament and selection and all of that. And through the course, we watched Matthew Tkachuk, and I kind of and they're both the Tkachuks are feisty and physical and all of that. And I said the difference for me that Matthew Tkachuk is like a missile. His hits are strategic and targeted. Brady Tkachuk is more like a wrecking ball. He's just a menace on the ice, and he's mean. He has.
He can be,
he's a lot more like his dad. He seems to enjoy more than enjoying the physical part. He seems to enjoy hurting people. A bit of a raging bull, and I think that you don't get that just because you're big. You don't get that just because you have the same stature as Brady Tkachuk. And I don't think that Juraj Slafkovsky has that in him, in his nature. He's got the size, but so, play true to your own identity, I think, whatever that is. And obviously he's struggling. It's been a really tough season for him. Sometimes he's been involved. Sometimes he's on the perimeter and not making an impact at all. And he's got to figure that out, and we're going to have to watch that over the next 2 months and see if he can figure himself out of who he wants to be.
So last but not least, storyline number 8 to watch over these next 8 weeks of the Habs season. Kirby Dach and Alex Newhook. Are the Habs going to get the return on investment that they had hoped for these two players?
This one's almost, the door's almost shut. Yeah. On this one, that no, it was an overpay for both of them. But the Canadiens and those two players have to figure out what kind of role that they're going to have. If it's not going to be what was planned, then what kind of role are they going to have, and how can they contribute? How can they be impactful? And they got to figure that out over the next 2 months in order to have a plan for next season.
They do. There also needs to be a plan. I think we're going to have a bonus topic here.
I thought it was 8 in 8 weeks.
It
8
is.
storylines in 8 weeks.
We like to
bonus?
Under promise and over deliver.
All right. Yeah.
That's what we do here.
We like it.
Because another big question that needs to be settled is goaltending starts between Montembeault and Dobesh in this final 8-week stretch. And if I had my druthers, it would be Dobesh starting more often.
I think as far as the plan for the future and as far as the play on the ice, I think it's pretty clear that the two of them could easily split starts. They could have an equal rotation. It's one thing Marty needs help with because he has not been good with his goalie deployment. That happened last year in the mess that he made in the 3 goalie rotation. It happened earlier this season with not using Primo forever and destroying his confidence. I think that Sam Montembeault is not the goalie of the future. It's likely to be the tandem of Jacob Fowler. Let's hope it's Fowler and Dobesh. Dobesh has proved that he can be an NHL goaltender, or at least is on track to be an NHL goaltender. And I think the Canadiens need to give him more opportunities, and not always against the toughest competition as has been in the past. Equal out the starts a little bit more, and also for Dobesh to get in that rhythm that he knows when he's going to be starting.
That's right. Absolutely. So there you have it. 8+1. That's actually 9 storylines for you to watch over the next 8 weeks of the Canadiens season. Our Canadiens Connection question of the week for all of you that we want to hear your answers to: what's the one thing you really want to see from the Habs in these final 8 weeks? What's the one thing you want to see from the Montreal Canadiens in these final 8 weeks? Send us your response on our Rocket Sports text line. That's at 5853-ROCKET. Send us an email, hello@rocketsportsmedia.com. Leave us a comment on YouTube. You can find that at insidethecanadiens.com. Or just send us a reply or a DM on social media at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Let us know what you think, or if you have a question, a general comment, and we're going to read the best replies next week on the show. So send us an answer and then tune in next week to see if yours is chosen. All right, we are going to take our final break here on the Canadiens Connection podcast. We are going to hear from our sponsors over at DraftKings during this break, and when we come back, we are doing exactly what I just mentioned. We are going to be reading your answers to last week's Canadiens Connection question of the week. Maybe yours is one that's going to be picked out this week. So stay with us. You are listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio.
This NHL season has been as predictable as a puck rolling on its edge. No one knows where it's going. But that just means there's time for your favorite team to figure things out. And games left for you to get in the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your team, and place your first bet. And if you're new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. New customers only. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. NHL and the NHL Shield are registered trademarks of the National Hockey League. NHL and NHL team marks are the property of the NHL and its teams. Copyright NHL 2025, all rights reserved.
And welcome back to episode 336 of the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio. Don't forget, if you haven't done so already and you've been enjoying today's episode, take a moment to just tap the subscribe button. Also, head over to our YouTube channel if you aren't already watching the podcast there. Head over to our YouTube channel at InsideTheCanadiens.com and tap subscribe there as well. And really, if you're on a podcast platform that allows you to leave reviews, we would be ever so grateful if you would just take a moment to leave a review on the show. It takes just a second, and it really helps us reach even more Habs and hockey fans who are out there looking for the next podcast that they want to add to their rotation. And if you're really feeling generous, why don't you tap that share button as well and share this episode with all of your social media friends and followers. And hey, encourage them to send us a message to give us their Canadiens Connection question of the week thoughts and responses, and let them know that this is an interactive podcast. We read anything contributed by our fans and followers and listeners and viewers. We read your responses right here on the show so that Habs fans all over the world get to hear your thoughts on the Montreal Canadiens. And so if you want to be a part of that, if you have friends that you think would want to be a part of that and have their voices heard, encourage them to send in their thoughts as well. I'll give you a reminder for this week's Canadiens Connection question of the week. This is what we want to hear from you about this week. What's the one thing that you want to see from the Habs in these final 8 weeks of the regular season? Maybe it's one of the 8 or 9 things we just gave you in the Big Topic segment a few minutes ago, or maybe there's something completely different that we didn't touch on that you want to see from the Habs in these final 2 months of the season. Let us know. We'll be reading your best replies next week. But this week, we want to read your responses to last week's question, which is we were talking about how the Laval Rocket has just absolutely turned things completely around in a year and have just been at the top of the charts in the standings in the AHL for much of the season. And we asked, can Laval's dominance in the AHL this season translate to future success for the Montreal Canadiens? And we had some thoughtful responses and certainly some different ideas and perspectives. And Rick, I think you're going to start with a comment that we got on our Substack.
That's right. Yeah, and you can make your comment anywhere: Facebook, X, Instagram, Hockey Buzz, by email. Our email address is hello@rocketsportsmedia.com. Probably at the Rocket Sports text line 5853 Rocket. The newest way you can reach us is through Substack. So subscribe on our Rocket Sports. Look for Rocket Sports on Substack. You'll see our articles there. And you can comment on those articles, and the best ones we'll pick to read on air. This one comes from our dear friend Dino on the Rocket Sports Substack. He says, Luby and Rick, in CH Matters, we're done like dinner, and you can't blame the injuries. Gooley and Heineman are stalwarts, but much is still lacking. We were doing it with smoke and mirrors, and now that the smoke is cleared, we see who we really are, a team in transition with missing parts, and that includes coaching. Is a fire sale coming? But you got to be careful, my friend. CH28, CH40, that's Dvorak and Armia, okay for the fire sale. CH71, Evans, not sure. Who would replace him? And trading defensemen, CH8, CH58, Matheson and Savard, who will deputize our youthful defensemen. We need veteran leadership for the transition. Other teams won't be doing us any favors. They will try to empty our treasure chest in any way possible. Let's see what happens next. I hate to see Pezzetta sit out. That's not right. He's earned a place on the bench, unlike others. Need leadership like his. Thanks for all you and Amy do, from Dino.
Great comment from Dino, as always. Shifting over to YouTube, She26, she must be feeling a little bit better, hopefully, because she had a lengthy reply after listening to the podcast saying, oh, those last 2 games the Canadiens played were not good, like really not good. Congrats, Amy, on your team winning the Super Bowl. Thank you very much. She says, the only thing I know about football is Taylor Swift's boyfriend is Travis Kelce. She says, sad but true. I'll let you slide on that one. I'll let you slide. She says, yay, Reinbacher. So happy to see him back. And geez, I really hope they don't trade Evans. If they can throw out that much money on Slavkovsky, who is unproven, they better offer Jake at least something close to what his agent is trying to negotiate for. That's all we need. Yeah, let's lose another great player. Sheesh. I really enjoy hearing about all our prospects, wherever they may be. I especially love Laval and Pascal Vincent, but I'm definitely worried about the injuries. Good for Vincent. I respect his opinion on Laval, players, and penalties. I believe he knows what he's doing. If penalties begin to interfere with how the team is doing, he'll take care of it. Hey, Rick, telling Marty St. Louis to be careful when it comes to any player of value is like having a conversation with a rock.
I had said, be careful with how he treats a promising prospect like Jakub Dobeš.
That's right. She says, talk about introducing the world to hockey. 4 Nations was nuts. Just absolutely amazing. It was my first time ever seeing it, and it was thrilling. Question. I would definitely hope Pascal Vincent would join the Habs. There lies a much better chance of the team doing better than they are now. I don't like Marty St. Louis. I know, shocker. I haven't liked him from the beginning. Even if he becomes a better coach, he plays favorites with rookies that for whatever reason he doesn't like. He also doesn't like the truth, or so it seems, unless it benefits him. His ego is bigger than the Bell Center, which is another thing that drives me nuts. I think I'll stop right there. I could easily come up with more, but thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Awesome show and work as usual, and amazing content. I really enjoyed this one. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, She. We're glad that you enjoyed it. Always happy to hear that one of our listeners is so very pleased with the content that we've provided for them for the week.
Last comment we're going to read again comes from YouTube. This one from @CenterHeis7948. A regular commenter. He says, great work again, Amy and Rick. As far as will Laval's success have an effect on Habs in the future? For sure it will. But I do think it'll be an ongoing thing. I think we may get a handful of the players from Laval in the future, but we'll need a continual cycle going with prospects, because one area we have some talent is size. Size is a bit of an issue. So I think the bigger talented forwards, which we have a huge need for, will be the ones. Sorry to say, in this group, we have far too many small forwards, but we can throw them into trade packages, I think. We have a few, like the Tucks and possibly the Florian Jacquais and several other ones to come later, like Hage and players still in lower leagues. Defense will be positive for sure. Ingstrom, Logan Mailloux, and probably Reinbacher. So defense, I think, will be the best part, and a few of the bigger forwards once they gain the development needed. But success at the AHL level is always a huge positive for the mother team. Goalies should be fine in the future with Fowler and Dobeš, but I get a little concerned with the Fowler transition until it happens, until it translates. I believe it will, but where did we have a story like that before? He's talking about Primo, who was an AHL All-Star, and that's it. Didn't translate to the NHL. So I personally have to be cautious on overpraising Fowler yet. Great college stats like Primo, so I'm cautious till it translates. But again, we don't have enough larger and talented forwards in Laval this year. Too many Smurfs. Good news is that they will be there in a couple of seasons, and I do firmly believe in a great farm system that helps build a great mother team. Have a great work. I hate to say this. This is his PS, but the USA is going to crush us. LOL. Didn't. The USA came in as favorites, and Canada found a way to win. So hopefully that's good news for you, Center Heis.
And thank you for your comment. As always, if you'd like to get in on the possibility of having your thoughts read on next week's show, then be sure to send us your answers or just your thoughts and comments or questions in to the Rocket Sports text line, 585-3-ROCKET, or drop us a comment in YouTube or Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and we will certainly toss your comment into the hat to see if yours is one that we read next week. So you know how it goes. There's 3 games now between now and the next time we get together for another episode of the podcast. Montreal is in Ottawa tonight, which is Saturday night. Then Tuesday night, they'll be back in the Bell Center to host the Carolina Hurricanes, and then on Thursday, hosting the San Jose Sharks. It'll be interesting to see how all three of those games pan out after this nice little break that the team has had. And you can be sure that when we get back together again next Saturday, March 1st, we're going to talk about it in depth. And hopefully we'll have some interesting topics to cover. We always manage to find them. And so we thank you very much for being here for this episode. We greatly enjoy bringing you this content each and every week. Be sure to subscribe, hit share if you can, drop us a comment, and come back again next week for another episode of the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio.
Click subscribe so you never miss an episode of Canadiens Connection. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Rocket Sports.